They laughed at her. A hotel manager mocked a young black woman in front of everyone, not knowing the truth. Moments later, the room went silent when she revealed she owned the entire hotel, and with one word, she ended his career. What happened next? It's the kind of justice you'll never forget. The Grand Crest Hotel stood like a glass fortress in the heart of Manhattan. From the outside, it was all shimmering walls and silver trim, the kind of place that whispered luxury with every polished surface. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and money, a subtle blend of wealth and authority that clung to the very walls. To most people, it was untouchable, but Maya Carter wasn't most people. Dressed in a simple gray hoodie and worn sneakers, Maya didn't look like she belonged there. The other guests, men in tailored suits, women in silk dresses, glanced at her briefly, then dismissed her. That was fine. She liked it that way, because Maya didn't need anyone to see her. She owned the place. It was a lesson she'd learned from her father. As a child, she'd spent countless afternoons sitting in the corner of cheap motels while he worked long hours as a janitor. He'd never complained, not once, but she remembered the way some managers talked to him, the way their words carried that sharp edge of quiet cruelty. One memory stood out above all others. She was 8 years old, sitting on a plastic chair with her homework while her father scrubbed the lobby floors of a motel in Georgia. A manager, red-faced and pompous, had sneered at her father. "You missed a spot," he'd said, even though the floor was spotless. "People like you need to pay more attention if you want to keep your job." Her father had smiled and nodded. Shoulders bowed slightly. But when they got home, Maya had seen him pause in the doorway, exhaustion and quiet humiliation etched on his face. That was the night he'd knelt down, cupped her chin, and said, "Baby girl, promise me something. One day you're gonna build a place where nobody talks down to folks who work hard. You hear me?" Maya had promised. And she never broke promises. Now, years later, she owned not just a hotel but a chain of them, each one standing as proof that her father's dream had become real. But she didn't run them from a distance. At least once a month, she dressed down, blending in as an ordinary guest to see how her staff treated people when they didn't know she was watching. That morning was no different. She walked through the lobby quietly, unnoticed by the doorman and receptionists, and made her way to the dining area. The breakfast spread was impeccable. Crisp bacon, golden waffles, steaming coffee. She filled her plate modestly and chose a corner table with a perfect view of the city skyline. As she sat down, she felt a strange peace settle over her. She loved this ritual, loved seeing the hotel not from the top floor in her executive suite but from the ground level, where her father would have stood. But peace, Maya had learned, rarely lasted long in places like this. Across the room, Robert Hayes, the hotel's general manager, noticed her. He was a tall man with slicked back hair, his suit perfectly tailored, his expression sharp with the kind of authority that didn't need to be spoken aloud. To Robert, the hotel wasn't just a job, it was his kingdom. He prided himself on keeping a certain standard, and the sight of Maya, a young black woman in a hoodie eating alone, immediately set off alarms in his head. His jaw tightened. He didn't recognize her. And in Robert Hayes' world, people who didn't look like they belonged didn't deserve to be there. He straightened his tie, plastered on a professional smile, and started walking toward her table, his polished shoes striking the marble floor like a judge's gavel. Maya didn't look up. Not yet. She sipped her coffee slowly, almost sensing the storm about to break. Because if there was one thing she'd learned in life, it was this: you could always tell who a person really was by how they treated someone they thought couldn't fight back. And Robert Hayes was about to show her exactly who he was. Robert approached with his usual air of authority, each step echoing against the polished marble floor. The hum of breakfast chatter dimmed slightly, as though the room sensed something about to happen. Maya didn't flinch. She stirred her coffee, calm as still water, but her eyes remained sharp, watching him through the reflection in the glass window beside her. "Excuse me," Robert said, his voice carrying just enough volume to command the attention of nearby tables. "This section is reserved for our premium guests. I'm afraid you may be lost." Maya lifted her gaze slowly. Her eyes met his steady, unshaken. "Lost?" she repeated, her voice even, polite. Robert's smile was thin, professional, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, this area is for registered guests of our executive suites. Perhaps the cafe downstairs would be more appropriate for—" He paused, letting his gaze flick deliberately over her hoodie and sneakers. "Your needs." Several heads turned now. A businessman in a navy suit at the next table raised an eyebrow. A couple at the far end of the room exchanged knowing glances, the kind that came with quiet judgment. Maya didn't move. She set her coffee cup down carefully. "I like it here," she said softly. Robert's jaw twitched. He wasn't used to being defied. "Ma'am, I'll have to ask you to relocate. We have standards to maintain." There it was, the word she had heard her entire life. Standards. Once upon a time, it was the same word that had been thrown at her father when his hands came home raw and red from scrubbing tile dot. She almost smiled. But instead, she leaned back in her chair and asked, "And? Who exactly decides those standards?" Robert's expression hardened, but he kept his tone measured. "I do. As the general manager, it's my job to ensure that our guests feel comfortable. This," he gestured vaguely at her, "is not in line with our image." A ripple of uncomfortable silence followed. Maya looked around, scanning the room. Every eye was on her now, some curious, some pitying, a few entertained. She wasn't just a guest anymore. She was a spectacle, and Robert was reveling in it. "This isn't personal," Robert added, his voice softer but no less condescending. "You understand, I'm sure. We just have a certain reputation to uphold." Maya tilted her head slightly. "And if I don't move?" Robert chuckled. It was a low, practiced sound, the kind of laugh that masked arrogance as civility. "Then I'll have no choice but to involve security." The word security hung in the air like a knife. A few guests smirked, clearly expecting Maya to give in. Instead, she smiled. Not mockingly, not defiantly, just a small, knowing smile, the kind of smile that said she already knew how this story would end. "Do what you need to do," she replied simply. For the first time, Robert's composure cracked. He hadn't expected resistance. He gestured to a nearby staff member, a young server who looked nervous enough to faint. "Call security," Robert ordered. "We don't need disruptions during breakfast hours." The server hesitated, glancing between Robert and Maya. Something in Maya's calm, steady posture made him pause, but Robert's sharp glare pushed him into action. He nodded and scurried off, and then Maya spoke again, her voice just loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. "You know," she said, stirring her coffee lazily, "my father used to tell me something. He said, the way someone treats you when they think you're powerless tells you everything about them." Robert frowned. "Excuse me?" But Maya didn't explain. Not yet. Instead, she smiled again, leaned back, and took a sip of her coffee. As if she had all the time in the world, and around them, whispers began to spread like wildfire. Who was she? Why wasn't she afraid? Why did she look so certain? Robert didn't know it yet, but he had just walked into the biggest mistake of his career, and Maya Carter, quiet, calm, and unshaken, was going to make sure of it. The young server returned moments later, pale-faced and uneasy. Behind him came two members of hotel security, both tall, broad-shouldered men in dark uniforms. The kind who usually never questioned Robert's orders. "Gentlemen," Robert said smoothly, his voice carrying like an announcement. "Please escort this guest downstairs. She seems to be confused about where she belongs." Maya didn't move. She didn't flinch. She just set her coffee cup down carefully, folding her hands in her lap as if she were merely observing a mild inconvenience. The security guards exchanged a look. Something about this didn't feel right. Maybe it was her composure, or maybe it was the quiet authority in her eyes, but neither moved immediately. "Sir," one of the guards said hesitantly, "is there an issue here?" "Yes," Robert snapped, his smile tightening. "The issue is that this young lady is in a restricted section meant for our premium clientele. Handle it." Maya's lips curved slightly, not in defiance but in patience, like a teacher allowing a child to make one last mistake before correcting him. "Do you know what I like most about mornings, Mr. Hayes?" Maya asked suddenly, her voice low but clear enough for the room to hear. Robert blinked, thrown off by the question. "Excuse me?" Maya leaned forward just slightly, her expression calm. "I like how mornings reveal people's true faces. Some people smile when the sun rises. Others—" Her eyes swept over him slowly, "hide behind their titles and uniforms." The room was silent except for the faint clinking of cutlery in the distance. Even the couple who had been gossiping 2 tables over had stopped eating. Robert's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered. "Security," he said again, more forcefully now. One of the guards took a step forward, and then, "Wait." The voice was quiet, but it sliced through the room like glass. It was Maya. She reached into her bag, slowly and deliberately, and pulled out a slim black leather folder. She placed it on the table, sliding it toward Robert with one elegant motion. Robert frowned. "What is this?" "Open it," Maya said softly. Robert hesitated, glancing down. Then, with an irritated sigh, he flipped it open and froze. Inside was an embossed document. At the top, property deed, the Grand Crest Hotel. Below it, her name in bold, unmistakable letters, Maya Carter. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. Robert's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at her, then back at the document, then at her again as though hoping it was some elaborate prank. The guards leaned closer, their brows furrowing. One of them muttered, "Wait." "She's the—" "Yes," Maya said, her voice steady. "I'm the owner." A ripple of gasps spread through the dining hall. The businessman in the navy suit nearly choked on his coffee. The gossiping couple stared like they'd just seen a ghost. Even the staff standing by the door shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. Robert's face drained of color. I didn't know," he stammered. Maya tilted her head, her expression calm but sharp, as a blade. "Exactly. You didn't know. You didn't even bother to ask." Robert's hands twitched at his sides, and for the first time in years, he looked small. Stop." Maya's voice was quiet, but it silenced him instantly. She rose from her chair, her posture commanding now, radiating the same authority he had so arrogantly wielded against her. "You humiliated me in front of my guests," she said, her voice low but dangerous. "You judged me by what I was wearing, not by who I am. And worst of all, you did it while representing my hotel." Robert swallowed hard. The guards stood frozen, unsure whether to move or stay, and then Maya smiled a cold, precise smile that carried the weight of a storm. "Mr. Hayes," she said softly, "you're finished here." The words struck like a gavel hitting wood. For a heartbeat, the entire dining hall was silent. Even the clatter of dishes from the kitchen had ceased, as though the whole building itself was holding its breath. Robert Hayes stood stiff, his face a shifting palette of disbelief, fear, and indignation. "Maya," he began, his voice cracking slightly, "there must be a misunderstanding. I was only doing your job?" Maya's words cut clean through his excuses. She stepped closer, her voice calm but sharp, like silk hiding a blade. "Is that what you call it? Humiliating guests before verifying who they are?" Robert's throat bobbed as he swallowed. I didn't realize," Maya leaned in, just enough that only he could hear the next words. "That's the problem, Robert. You never realize, not until it's too late." When she stepped back, her eyes swept across the room, her gaze firm but not cruel. She wasn't just speaking to Robert now, she was speaking to everyone. "I grew up watching men like you," Maya said, her voice carrying through the hall. "Men who think that a title gives them the right to treat people like they're less than human. My father worked in hotels his entire life. He was invisible to people like you. You looked at him and saw a janitor. I looked at him and saw a man who built his dignity from the ground up." A murmur rippled through the room. The businessman in the navy suit leaned forward, listening now not out of curiosity, but respect. Robert shifted uncomfortably. This isn't the place for—" "Oh, I think it's exactly the place," Maya interrupted. Her hand rested lightly on the table, her posture commanding. "Because you didn't just humiliate me, Robert. You humiliated every single person who's ever been judged for not fitting someone else's picture of what success looks like, and I won't allow it. Not in my hotel." Her words hit like thunder. Even the security guards stood straighter, as if silently agreeing. Robert's face flushed a deep shade of red. I can explain." "No," Maya said, her voice quiet but uncheckable. "You're done explaining. You're done deciding who belongs here. As of this moment, you're no longer the manager of the Grand Crest Hotel." Robert froze. You can't just—" "Oh, I can," Maya replied, pulling her phone from her pocket. A few swift taps, and a call rang out over speaker. "Good morning, Anthony," she said when a deep voice answered. "Yes, Miss Carter?" "Please have HR draft the termination papers for Robert Hayes, effective immediately. I'll sign them within the hour." There was a brief pause on the line, followed by a crisp, "Understood, Miss Carter." Robert's lips parted in shock. "You can't do this to me," he hissed, his voice dropping low now, desperate, almost pleading. Maya tilted her head. "Robert, you did this to yourself." A single tear of rage humiliation perhaps glimmered in Robert's eye, but he blinked it away and stood stiff, clinging to the last threads of dignity he had left. Maya turned to the room, her voice softening. "To anyone watching," she said, "let this be clear. This hotel doesn't just serve luxury, it serves respect. No matter who you are, no matter what you wear, no one will ever be treated like they don't belong here." And for the first time that morning, the dining hall erupted not in laughter, not in whispers, but in quiet applause. A few guests nodded. One of the security guards even smiled faintly. Robert, however, didn't move. He stood there like a statue, pale and trembling. Maya looked at him one last time. "Collect your things. You're done." And with that, she sat back down, picked up her coffee, and took a slow, unbothered sip. The world around her was different now, because Maya Carter had just reminded everyone who truly owned this place, both the building and the respect within it. Robert stood frozen, his hands trembling slightly, but his pride wouldn't let him bow out quietly. "You'll regret this," he spat, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the applause that had rippled through the dining hall. His words, bitter and venomous, carried not just anger but a strange, desperate kind of defiance. Maya didn't even look up from her coffee. "I don't regret what's right," she replied evenly. Robert's jaw clenched. He turned sharply. toward the guests who had witnessed everything. "This woman is making a mistake," he said, his voice rising with a mixture of desperation and authority. "She doesn't understand how this hotel operates. I've been running this place for years. Without me, this hotel will finally breathe." Maya interrupted, her voice quiet but lethal. Her words landed like a hammer. Robert's face darkened, and then, to everyone's shock, he laughed. Not a joyful laugh, but one laced with bitterness. "You think you own this place? You may have the paperwork, Maya Carter, but you don't know what it takes to run it. You walk in here thinking a deed and a name make you powerful?" Maya finally set her coffee down. Slowly, deliberately, she rose to her feet again. "I don't think I'm powerful," she said softly, stepping closer until there were only inches between them. "I know I am. Because I earned every piece of this place while men like you were busy guarding titles and humiliating people you thought were beneath you." For a moment, Robert faltered, but his pride wouldn't die so easily. He turned to the guards, his last hope. "Are you seriously going to let her do this?" He barked. The guards exchanged a look. One of them, a tall man with graying hair, stepped forward. His voice was steady, resolute. "Sir, she's the owner. Our orders come from her now." Robert's face drained of color. And then Maya leaned in, just enough for only him to hear, her voice soft but devastating. "Robert, I gave you chances. Every time you looked at someone and judged them, every time you used this hotel like your personal throne, you were digging your own grave. I didn't even have to push. You buried yourself." Robert's lips parted, but no words came. His hands curled into fists, trembling. The tension in the room was unbearable now. Every guest watching like this was the grand finale of a play they hadn't paid for but couldn't look away from. Robert's final defense came in the form of a single, venomous sentence. "You're just like your father," he hissed. The words hit Maya like a spark striking dry wood. She didn't flinch, but her eyes hardened, the room catching the faintest flicker of fire behind them. "My father," she said, her voice low and steady, "was a better man than you could ever dream of being. And unlike you, he never had to humiliate people to feel important." Her words didn't just silence Robert. They crushed him, and in that moment, every single person in the room knew it. Robert Hayes wasn't just fired, he was finished. But before Maya turned away, she looked at him one last time. "This is your last day in this hotel," she said. "And the only thing you're taking with you is the memory of this moment." Robert didn't answer. He couldn't. He was already defeated. But for Maya Carter, this wasn't the end. It was the turning point. Because for the first time in years, she felt her father's words in her heart, steady and true. Power isn't about titles. It's about what you do when someone tries to take your dignity away. Maya had just shown the entire world what happens when you fight back. Robert stood frozen in place, his chest rising and falling rapidly as if every breath he took was a battle. The weight of Maya's words pressed down on him, and yet his pride clung desperately to whatever scraps of authority he thought he had left. But Maya had changed. The girl who once silently endured judgment had been replaced by a woman who no longer asked for permission. Her presence filled the dining hall, commanding it, reshaping it. Every guest, every staff member, even the guards, watched her not out of curiosity now, but respect. Maya stepped closer to Robert, her heels clicking softly against the polished marble floor. "You had every chance to treat people with dignity," she said, her voice quiet but strong enough to cut through the heavy silence. "Instead, you chose arrogance. And now, Robert, you get to live with the consequences of your choices." Robert's hands twitched at his sides. "You can't just throw away years of my work like this," he rasped out. Maya tilted her head. "Years of your work? Robert, you didn't build this hotel. You just guarded it like a man terrified of losing his throne." She took a deep breath, and for a brief moment, her eyes softened not with sympathy, but with something heavier. "Resolve. My father used to tell me," she continued, her voice lowering, "that real leaders don't stand at the top of the mountain looking down. They climb with their people. You never learned that." Robert's face twisted, but he stayed silent. Maya turned, looking at the staff who had gathered around the room, drawn by the confrontation. Some of them looked nervous, others hopeful. For years, Robert's shadow had loomed over them. And now in this single moment, Maya was shattering it. "This hotel will be different," Maya announced, her voice ringing with finality. "No more arrogance, no more humiliation. This place will be built on respect. Not just for the guests, but for everyone who steps foot through these doors." The staff straightened, their expression shifting from fear to quiet awe. Robert's lips parted. You can't change everything overnight." Maya turned back to him, her gaze unwavering. "Watch me." Then she gestured toward the guards. "Escort Mr. Hayes out of the building. He no longer represents the Grand Crest." The two security guards, who had stood in uneasy silence before, moved with certainty now. One stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Robert's arm. "Sir." The guard said, "You need to come with us." For the first time, Robert's defiance crumbled. His shoulders slumped, his face pale. He glanced around, but there was no support to be found. Not a single person defended him. As the guards led him toward the exit, Robert cast one last look at Maya, a look not of anger anymore, but defeat, and Maya didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply turned back to the room and, with calm authority, addressed the staff and guests once more. "Breakfast is on me today," she said, her lips curving slightly. "Consider it a reminder. In this hotel, you belong." The room broke into quiet applause again. But this time, it wasn't just for her authority, it was for what she represented. Maya sat back down, her coffee still warm, her hand steady, and in that moment, she felt it. Transformation. She wasn't just the silent girl who had been humiliated once upon a time. She was Maya Carter, the woman who had turned humiliation into power and power into change. And it was only the beginning. The dining hall gradually returned to its usual rhythm, though something in the air had changed lighter, freer, like a heavy weight had been lifted from the walls themselves. Guests returned to their meals, but they stole glances at Maya, admiration clear in their eyes. Maya, however, remained seated for a moment longer, her fingers wrapped loosely around her coffee cup. The bitter aroma rose gently, grounding her. For the first time in years, she felt completely still. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Carter?" Maya looked up to see one of the servers, a young woman no older than 20, standing before her, her hands nervously clutching her apron. "Yes?" Maya asked gently. The girl hesitated, then smiled shyly. I just wanted to say thank you for what you did. No one's ever stood up to him before. We didn't think anyone ever would." Maya's chest tightened, a warm ache spreading through her. She saw something in that girl's face, something that reminded her of herself, back when she was young and dreaming of something better. "You don't have to thank me," Maya said softly. "Just promise me something." The girl nodded quickly. "Anything. Promise me that one day, when it's your turn to stand up for what's right, you won't hesitate." The young woman's eyes shone. "I promise." Maya gave her a small, reassuring smile, then turned her gaze back to the window, where the morning sun had begun to pierce through the glass, flooding the room with golden light. For a brief moment, her mind drifted backward to her father. She could almost see him standing in the corner of the room, his familiar, proud smile watching over her. "You did it, Maya," she imagined him saying. Her throat tightened, but not from sadness. No, it was pride, because she finally understood what he had meant all those years ago. Dignity isn't given. It's claimed. And today, she hadn't just claimed hers. She'd made it clear that no one in her hotel would ever be stripped of theirs. With a deep breath, she rose from her seat. The staff followed her with their eyes, some still in awe, others exchanging hopeful glances. The atmosphere was no longer tense, it was alive. Maya walked toward the reception desk, where the assistant manager, a polite young man who had been too afraid to challenge Robert before, was standing. He straightened instantly when she approached. "Miss Carter," he said nervously, "what would you like us to do now?" Maya glanced around the lobby, her gaze sweeping over the polished floors, the staff, and the guests who had witnessed it. "All, now," she said with a calm, determined smile. "We make this hotel what it was always meant to be. A place of respect, luxury, and family. And it starts today." The assistant manager nodded, relief and determination lighting up his face. As Maya turned to walk toward the elevator, she felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. Robert was gone. The shadows he cast were gone with him. And in their place was something new, something she had built with her own hands, her own heart, and her unshakable belief that no one should be treated as less than they are. She pressed the elevator button and stepped inside, the doors closing softly behind her. As the elevator rose, so did her resolve. This was no longer just a hotel. It was her hotel, and it would never be the same again. Later that evening, the Grand Crest Hotel was quiet. The bustling morning crowd had faded into the calm hum of luxury that usually settled over the building at night. Maya stood alone on the rooftop terrace, the city lights stretching out before her like a field of stars. The cool breeze brushed against her face as she sipped a glass of sparkling water, her reflection shimmering faintly in the window beside her. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself a moment to simply breathe. The echoes of the day still played in her mind: Robert's humiliation, the stunned faces of the guests, the way her staff had stood taller after she had spoken. It was more than just a confrontation. It was a shift. A promise. Her phone buzzed softly. A message from Anthony, her right-hand man in the corporate office. "Anthony, HR has completed the paperwork. Robert's termination is final. You did good today, Maya. The entire staff is talking about it." Maya smiled faintly, typing back a short reply. "Maya, thank you, Anthony. This is only the beginning." She slipped her phone back into her pocket and looked out over the city once more. For a moment, her thoughts wandered back to her father again, his quiet strength, his unyielding belief in dignity and respect. She imagined his voice, warm and steady. "You didn't just take back what was yours, Maya. You changed what it means to belong." Her eyes softened. He was gone, but in this moment, she felt him closer than ever. Maya turned from the edge of the terrace and walked back toward the elevator. The hotel was quiet, but she knew tomorrow it would be alive again with guests, staff, and new challenges. But she wasn't afraid of challenges anymore. Not after today. As the elevator doors closed around her, a new thought formed in her mind, an idea that made her smile. If this was what one decisive day could do, what could she accomplish in a year? 5 years? The possibilities felt endless. And as the elevator descended, Maya Carter, once humiliated, now unstoppable, knew one thing for certain. This was no ending. It was the beginning of a legacy.